Hello everyone and welcome back to another Black Desert video. So today I want to share 5 settings to use to improve your FPS, because not only is this important for your everyday, but recently the new Arena of Solaire started, and a few questions I've been getting were, how do I improve my FPS for PvP? This is not really a new thing, but I wanted to share my settings with you guys and talk about some important stuff. So first of all, in your settings, I'm going to go over my performance and display, and then we'll go over everything else at the end. So the important part, the FPS settings that I use, I'll try to talk about it and explain why I have it. So 5 settings to use. I wrote a little bit of a list, and things that I think are the most important to go for is number 1, the low power option. I believe this one is on by default. And make sure to turn it off to improve the game's performance by using up more of your computer's resources. Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. Basically uses your game's resources and it performs better. So make sure to turn this off, and I think it's on by default. Number 2, for improving everything else, is just a hit and miss detection. You just kind of want to have these on in general, just because it shows you what you're actually doing. Usually other games have numbers, but this game just tells you like what kind of special attack you did and the miss effect if you miss. So these are important to have on. The next important thing that I wanted to show you was the camera vision. Now, where is that? So I believe this is not at 100 by default. What you want to do is raise it up to see more in the game. So basically this is your FOV slider. I don't know what it is by default, but the more you see, the better, obviously. So try to turn it up to 100, and that'll improve everything, whether you're PvEing, PvPing, you know, taking screenshots of the game. This is something you want to have at max, and higher is better. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about was full screen versus full screen window. Now, as we all know, full screen will uncap your FPS. Full screen window, you could still uncap it, but you have to do like extra steps. Go to your like NVIDIA control panel, or if you're not on an NVIDIA card, the equivalent of that. And basically, you just have to turn VSync off in your settings, like outside of the game, and make sure that this one is set to whatever your monitor cap is, if that's above 60. So I play window full screen simply because I'm recording a video, and sometimes I just like tabbing out. But if you're not a creator, or you just like playing the game, that's it, I would always play full screen, just because that default uncaps your FPS. You don't have to mess with any other settings, and then your FPS should be, you know, above 60 ideally. So yeah, obviously higher FPS is better. I'm in town right now, but so that's why it's a little bit lower. But for the rest of us playing full screen, you don't really have to think about too much about third-party tweaking or anything else, and you'll be good. So another setting I wanted to talk about that I personally don't use is the crop mode and the UI scale. So based on your monitor, basically the UI settings, if you do this, all your bars in the UI settings will be a little bigger or smaller. I personally think 100 is just fine, which is default. But some people who monitor all their abilities like very closely, and then like basically if you raise it up or not, the icons and everything will be different. So I personally wouldn't mess with the UI scale if you're playing on anything above 1080, but you know, personal preference. The most important thing is crop mode. You ever watch those streamers or other YouTubers where they have black bars at the top or the side? Unfortunately, I can't show you this without having to restart the game, because that's how you have to do it. But basically, this adds the black bars on the top and bottom of your screen. It kind of looks ugly, but you know, for people who are like locked in and you want to focus on a certain thing, that's how you basically add the black bars at the top and bottom, and then on the sides. Basically what it allows you to do is it like blocks off certain things you don't need to see, and you can move your UI around there. Basically it gives more FPS, and then if you only have it cropped on the top and bottom, you could see a little bit further horizontally, but ultimately it makes the game just look different. And especially if you're a creator and you're not PvPing, you kind of just want to see things normally. So I don't use it, but for people who are literally trying to push your FPS to the maximum and see the most you can, you do that. And then this is what I play on. I play on high and very high. We all know those people, if you've ever watched a stream from like any sort of node war and people are playing on RuneScape low optimal settings, it's because FPS is very important. FPS equals DPS. That's like half a meme, but actually half kind of true. So yeah, if even the people who have like $10,000 computers are playing on potato settings, it's because this game is not optimized that well, so that's why you do it. So either way, I kind of like to have a balance between, you know, looking nice for video. And also, I mean, I think the game is actually a really nice looking game overall. So I wanted a balance between good FPS and the game actually looking nice. Yeah, I could have, you know, a lot more FPS if I played on potato, but, you know, if this is a game you play on a regular, you kind of want to have a balance between looking nice and performance. So that also goes into the optimization. But I think the biggest thing you guys can mess with, like if you're trying to improve your FPS in general, it would probably be like, you know, tweaking your textures and graphics. Ultra, you just don't play in ultra. It's for roleplay and screenshots. It tells you that. But remastered is okay. I think remastered is a little bit too bright for me. So there's a lot of settings you could tweak anyway, but I just think remastered is bright by default, and it does actually cut your FPS a little bit. So make like testing everything between here. I think medium is fine, but you know what I would play it is probably at least high if you can run it. But this is one of those personal preference based on whatever computer you have. And this is the other settings that I use as well. So just in case you want to have extra things turned off and on, reduce snow buildup. This is literally only in winter seasons, and you know, certain areas of the game where it does that. But 99% of the time, you probably won't notice this, and it's not a big deal. But you know, if FPS is important, then you basically reduce snow buildup and a few other things. All right, so frame optimization and everything. This is for people who have like lower end PCs. You can just set it to 60 and then turn it on. It kind of auto tweaks a lot of settings. I don't use it, but you know, if you're just trying to play at 60 and that's it, just turn it on. All of this is kind of outdated. I made a video of this a couple years ago where the AMD Fidelity FX was actually decent. Now they have a newer version, but BDO does not have the newer version. So, you know, I actually had a few issues back in the day when I had the AMD Fidelity FX on. And it was kind of like when I went into the Magnus well, it was extremely bright. And for the longest time, I had no idea what was causing it. And then I just turned it off and that problem literally went away. So that was the cause of it. I feel like there's a way to get this outside of the game and have that for it. But ultimately, like the performance from the older version to this one, it's very minimal. And if you have like any sort of modern PC, you'll probably not even need this one. Important settings are here. Once again, we talked about this in the beginning. This is probably one of the bigger ones. Low power option, turn that off and you'll be fine. Effect optimizations. If you have this on, you should always prioritize performance if you're PvPing. And if you just like shiny colors and flashy abilities, you could do effects. But I assume for the most important thing, like PvP and everything, you just performance. And then character optimization, you know how adventures will appear to you. Like if this was on and it's at max, you could probably see people coming in from further away. That's about it. I don't personally care. Camera vision range. There's a lot of settings that are in display and performance as well. So if you see it twice, it is what it is. But yeah, this is FOV. Slide it out. You can turn these on and off. it doesn't really make a difference. I play in full screen windowed simply because I have to monitor my recordings and everything, and I like to tab out. So that's about it. This is literally the same thing as before. These are the other settings I play. I personally like vibrance. Some people play with whatever. I think no non-contrast, but like the default one, and vibrance just look the nicest, but one of those personal preference ones. Effect opacity. This is actually important for FPS as well. You know how when you're firing off abilities in this game, it's how much detail it shows. I can show you an example. Well, let's use this person's horse. You see the water effects going off on here? Let me show you what this would look like. Basically, if it's at minimum, you probably won't be seeing the like water on the ground, and then this one. So yeah, this is what it looks like at minimum, and then this is what it looks like at maximum. I personally think, I've tested this a lot, between 70 to 100 is probably the best, and like more textures equals noticeable FPS dips every now and then. But like if you're doing stuff like, you know, the old Arethia's Limbo where you have to see the colors and everything, and various dungeons for the Ataraxian, you kind of want to have to turn those up to 100. I guess not even anymore now, because with today or this week's patch, they basically allowed you to just go to get the key and go to the boss fight. So it's not so important anymore. But like for various things where you have to see colors and everything, it is kind of important. For PvP, I know some people have this at very minimum, and some people don't even have skill effects because you could look at animations. I guess that depends on your game knowledge. But ultimately, for everyone else, I think between 70 to 100 is probably the sweet spot. And then I personally play on 95, but ultimately it just depends on your personal preference. This is actually one thing that I'm very happy that this game has that a lot of other games don't have, like color vision aid. I don't have any problems, but I'm glad that like people who do, this is something that they can actually use, and I think every game should have more color vision options. So yep, there's that. Camera graphics, basically all of this. If you are a creator, one thing you want to turn to 0 is motion blur and vibration. The last thing you want to see is someone do a grind video for 1 hour, and then every time you hit a skill, your screen shakes for like that, and especially motion blur. That is the most obnoxious thing I've ever seen. So if you're thinking about becoming a video creator, you turn these settings off immediately. Guarantee you every single creator has this at 0. But if you're just playing for fun, who cares? Just have it at whatever you like. And then everything else from now on is mostly personal preference, but I'll talk about some other things. These are what the settings that I use. So if you hear it in game and in other videos, this is what I actually just use. I turn off fairy volume. I remember I had this on at once, and then you know your fairy talks to you every now and then. And I'm like, where's that noise coming from? It's probably that, if in case you were wondering. So next thing we're going to talk about is the general settings and everything. So if you're a new player, you're probably seeing all of these settings, especially in the alerts, just because they're on by default. And like the first thing you do when you log into the game for the first time, you're like, what are all these settings? And then you'll see all these notifications at the top, like this item has been listed for X amount, and you're just like, what even is that item? So yeah, my recommendation for all of you guys is to turn all of these off until you think you need it, then turn it on. The important ones I would recommend are probably Central Market. This one is pretty decent for your everyday, especially if you're putting orders on like certain things. You can see when things get listed, and then you could put an order on it. So this one is probably the most relevant, and I think overall good. Notifications on the bottom right, you know how like every time there's a boss that appears, there's like a 15-minute timer. That's a different setting, but this one is also for other things as well. So I personally have a general idea of what's happening, but for new players, I think notification, Central Market might be a good one. Keep these two personal ones on. The way you could also see zone change is over here. It tells you like if it's in a blue zone, that means it's safe zone. Red is obviously in like non-safe zone, but you can just look over here. It doesn't really matter, but it just tells you up here, so I think it's fine. If you're a PvPer, you could get alerts for that. And then all of these, I personally would just turn this off. Most of these you don't really need to see. Chances are, if your friends log in guildies, you're all in Discord anyway, so it doesn't even matter. And then, yeah, and that's all. This is personal preference. And then show hide. This is what I have. And then, yeah, that's about it. Then world map. This is actually kind of important if you do any life skilling. So you know how when you open the world map and it follows the direction and everything, set world map camera angle. There are some times, okay, so this is what it looks like when you open by default. Have you ever watched a guide on YouTube and you're like trying to figure out where something is? And then they're like, oh, it's over here out in the middle of nowhere, but the camera is like upside down backwards. And you're like, what even is this? Yeah, just open it at the default. This is what it looks like. This, and then you see some weird angle of this. Like here, this is where the spot you're looking for is exactly right here. And you're just like, what's happening? Yeah, don't do that. That's weird. So that's, we all just go by default settings. It's fine. And then, this is actually kind of important. You guys ever, I have a few people have asked me this every now and then. How do you change the frame or the UI of this? This is literally how. I've kept mine on summer for the past like 3 years for all. And then this is what it looks like. This is literally personal preference. Navigation mark type. I think guide arrows is actually the most effective and efficient. Have you ever seen those marked lines that take you to weird things in Guide Fairy? No, if you just like literally just keep the default arrows, and this is probably the most efficient thing you can have, and then without extra steps along the way. Navigation path on land. Exact takes you from point A to B, even if there's a mountain directly in your path. Smooth will take you into the path without the least obstacles. So like if you're navigating, let's say you want to go to Coranda Ridge or something where, you know, up on a mountain. This is the shortest way to get there, but the smooth will take you on like a different route when, you know, with less obstacles. And exact is point A to B. Doesn't matter how many obstacles. Your horse might get stuck. It is what it is. So one of those personal preferences, I recommend to most people to learn the map as you play the game. That way you don't follow the auto path as much as possible. Here's what I would recommend all of you guys doing. Let's say you want to go to, I don't know, let's say the top of the castle right here. And you're just like, oh, I could follow this auto path, right? You know what you should do? You should look at this beacon in the sky, and then instead of following this auto path, you would go up these stairs and go out that way. And then there's another way. There's like multiple ways to do it. But in general, my tips to all of you, instead of following the auto path, follow the beacon in the sky where your auto path is, and that's how you figure out where to go in the fastest way. One of the things that I've noticed is, especially down in the Calpheon and Grana area, there are a lot of mountains, and especially one thing in the story that's like, you are at Trent, your objective is to go over here or something, right? And the auto path will take you like to across the mountain. You just look up and then you slightly maneuver around and you save a whole 5 minutes. So yeah, that's pro tips. And then aside from that, like all of these minimap guide and rotate minimap, I hate when people do that. I don't personally have to look at other guides for minimaps and locations for things too much anymore. But for all of you guys who do that, please just use the default. If you want to show someone your map and where something is, literally just do this. Don't turn your camera angle. Don't like zoom out at a weird angle like that. Everyone's just going to get confused. And there's that. Aside from that, all of these are, you know, personal preference and then hotkeys, inputs. If you're a controller player, yours is probably different. All these are pretty much personal preference. And the things I would recommend hotkeying and quick slotting. So a lot of people ask me, oh, how do I get so many keys for this and then all of this? When you edit your UI, these are quick slots and then these are cooldowns. People are like, how do you align that? You show the grid and then you align it. Trust me, I get it. There's a lot of like OCD people where things have to be pixel perfect. This is how you do it, or as close to that as possible. And so, yeah, that's really about it. And hope you guys enjoyed everything. As a quick recap on settings, which are the most important. 1, tweak your graphics and textures. That's probably going to be the biggest fix. Number 2, low power option off. And number 3 is probably your field of view or camera vision range. Number 4 is playing in full screen, or I guess it depends if you have your things tweaked, then you can play in window. It ultimately doesn't matter, but I think full screen is just easier for most people to do. And then 5 would be the crop mode if you feel like you need it. I personally don't, but really just depends on you and your monitor. So if you're playing on like an ultra wide monitor, trust me, I've tested it on there. I didn't like it, so it's what you do. Higher FPS, better. If I wasn't in town, this number would be higher. Trust me. But anyway, with that said, hopefully those tips help for you, and you guys get to see my settings as well. So this is what I play on basically all the time, and that's about it. So see you guys later. Peace.